December 8th, 1944, the Hürtgen Forest, Germany. Hauptmann Werner Schmidt crouches in a frozen command post, sorting through documents captured from an overrun American battalion headquarters, maps, orders, supply requisitions. Then, something stops him cold. A single typewritten sheet labeled Signal Corps Radio Distribution, 3rd Battalion, 22nd Infantry Regiment. He reads it twice, then a third time. The numbers make no sense. According to this document, the American battalion he just defeated possessed 53 separate radio transceivers. 53. Schmidt's entire regiment, 3 full battalions of German infantry, collectively operated 17 radios. He hands the paper to his commanding officer without a word. The colonel studies it, his face betraying nothing. But his question comes quietly, almost to himself. How do they coordinate anything? What neither German officer could grasp in that frozen bunker was that they were looking at the ghost of their own defeat, not in this battle, not even in this war alone, but in every subsequent conflict where information would matter more than ammunition. The Americans had not simply built more radios, they had reimagined what an army could be. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. In 1938, the German Heer began the largest military radio modernization program in history. At least, that was the intention. The Wehrmacht had just absorbed Austria, acquired the Sudetenland, and stood poised to become Europe's dominant military power. The Signal Corps, the Nachrichtentruppen, received authorization to equip every division with a dedicated signals battalion. The plan looked magnificent on paper. Each infantry division would receive a Nachrichtenabteilung of approximately 473 men, a headquarters staff, a telephone company for wire communications, a radio company with 3 platoons, support elements for maintenance and transport. The radio company would deploy medium-range transceivers at battalion and regimental level, everything necessary for modern combined arms warfare. The reality proved grimmer. German industry, despite its vaunted reputation, could not produce radios in the quantities required. The Tornister Funkgerät, the backpack radio series that formed the backbone of Wehrmacht communications, entered service years behind schedule. Production facilities, forced to prioritize tanks, artillery, and aircraft, treated radio manufacture as a luxury good. By the time Germany invaded Poland in September 1939, the average Wehrmacht infantry regiment possessed fewer than 12 complete radio sets. At battalion level, perhaps 3 or 4. At company level, often nothing. The younger officers, trained in the new doctrine of rapid maneuver warfare, found themselves commanding with methods their great-grandfathers would have recognized. Runners, signal flags, written messages, carried on horseback. Lieutenant Friedrich Holler, signals officer of the 76th Infantry Division during the invasion of France, wrote in his diary, "We practice blitzkrieg with 19th century communications. The tanks race ahead with radios. We plod behind with messenger dogs." The contrast with American planning could not have been starker. In July 1941, as German forces swept across the Soviet Union, a conference room in Chicago hosted a very different kind of invasion. The Galvin Manufacturing Corporation, which would soon become Motorola, had received a contract from the United States War Department. The requirement: develop a portable, battery-powered voice radio for infantry use. Daniel Noble, the lead engineer, made a decision that would echo through 7 decades of warfare. The Signal Corps had specified an AM radio amplitude modulation, the standard technology of the era. Noble insisted on FM, frequency modulation. His colleagues thought him mad. FM was newer, more complex, harder to manufacture. But Noble understood something fundamental about the nature of modern war. AM signals varied in strength, engine noise, artillery fire, the grinding of tank treads. All of it became static that drowned out voices. FM signals varied in frequency instead. They sliced through battlefield interference like a knife through fog. Clear, crisp, unmistakable, even under fire. The prototype, designated SCR-536, weighed just 5 pounds. A soldier could carry it in one hand while holding his rifle in the other. 5 vacuum tubes packed into a waterproof case, an antenna that extended 40 inches. The operator pulled out the antenna to turn it on, pushed it back to turn it off. Simple, soldier-proof, revolutionary. By July 1941, the same month Holler complained about his messenger dogs, the SCR-536 entered mass production. 1 month later, development began on its bigger brother, the SCR-300. This one weighed 38 pounds in its backpack configuration, but it could reach 3 miles reliably, sometimes up to 8 under ideal conditions. Most importantly, it used FM technology across 41 preset channels. The United States Army established a production goal that German planners would have dismissed as fantasy. Every rifle company would receive 6 SCR-536s, 1 for each of the 3 rifle platoons, 2 for the weapons platoon, 1 for the company commander. Every company would also receive 1 SCR-300 for communication with battalion headquarters. Every single one. Not just the companies in mechanized divisions, not just the companies in airborne units, every company in every battalion, in every division, coast artillery, infantry, cavalry, mountain troops, everyone. The mathematics of this commitment bordered on the absurd. A standard infantry division contained 9 rifle battalions. Each battalion had 3 rifle companies, 27 companies per division. Multiply by 6 SCR-536s per company, 162 handsets per division. Add the SCR-300s, the vehicle-mounted sets for armor and artillery, the long-range transceivers for regimental and division headquarters, a single American infantry division deployed with more radios than an entire German Army Corps, and America planned to field 90 of these divisions. The production numbers told the story. By war's end, Motorola alone would manufacture 130,000 SCR-536s, nearly 50,000 SCR-300s. This did not count the radios built by other contractors, the vehicle-mounted sets, the long-range units, or the thousands of sets shipped to Allied armies under Lend-Lease. German production of comparable equipment never exceeded 10,000 units annually, across all types, combined. The Torn.Few.B series, used at regimental and battalion level, entered service in quantities measured in hundreds, not thousands. The Torn.Fu.D2, the closest German equivalent to the SCR-300, reached perhaps 5,000 total units over 6 years of war. November 1942. Operation Torch. American forces waded ashore in North Africa, carrying radios the way German soldiers carried entrenching tools. Standard issue. Ubiquitous, unremarkable. Private Thomas Bradley of the 1st Infantry Division recalled, "Every squad leader had a handy talkie. We thought that was just how armies worked." The Germans thought otherwise. When elements of the 10th Panzer Division captured an American position near Teburba, the signals intelligence officer filed a report that reached Berlin within days. The Americans, he noted, maintained radio contact at platoon level. Individual squads called for artillery support directly. Company commanders spoke to battalion headquarters as casually as if using a telephone. The report concluded with a single line that Adolf Hitler himself reportedly read, "The enemy possesses communication capabilities we cannot match with current production." Hitler's response remains unrecorded, but the production quotas did not change. Germany in 1942 faced a choice between radios and tanks, between communication and firepower, between coordination and concentration. The decision, repeated month after month as Soviet forces ground westward, always favored the visible over the invisible. The Panther tank received priority over radio transceivers. The 88mm anti-aircraft gun received priority over radio transceivers. The V-2 rocket, an engineering marvel that achieved nothing of strategic value, received unlimited resources. while signal battalions went begging for replacement parts. Feldwebel Klaus Richter, a signals NCO in the 16th Volksgrenadier Division, described the situation in his memoirs. By 1944, we cannibalized broken radios to keep working ones functional. American prisoners expressed confusion. They asked why we did not simply requisition new equipment. They did not understand. There was no new equipment. The doctrinal implications cascaded through every level of German military organization. In American practice, a rifle platoon under fire could call for artillery support within 3 to 5 minutes. The platoon leader used his SCR 536 to contact his company commander. The company commander used his SCR 300 to reach battalion headquarters. Battalion passed the request to the artillery liaison officer. The Artillery Fire Direction Center, equipped with its own radio network, calculated firing solutions and transmitted them to the gun batteries. Shells landed before the platoon leader finished his second cigarette. German procedure required the platoon leader to send a runner to company headquarters. The runner, assuming he survived, delivered the message to the company commander, who sent another runner to battalion. Battalion dispatched a motorcycle courier to regimental headquarters. Regiment contacted division. Division notified the artillery regiment. The artillery regiment sent orders to its battalions by telephone wire. Assuming the wire had not been cut, the battalion sent a messenger to the battery commander. The battery commander ordered his guns to fire. This process, under ideal conditions, with no enemy interference and no broken communications links, required 15 to 30 minutes minimum, usually longer, often far longer. Sometimes the answer came, "Platoon no longer requires support, platoon no longer exists." The cruel mathematics of this disparity revealed itself most clearly in the hedgerow country of Normandy, June 1944. The American First Army, newly arrived in France, faced German defenders who had been fortifying their positions for 4 years. The bocage, the ancient hedgerow network of Normandy, created a nightmare maze of sunken lanes, thick vegetation, and limited visibility. Traditional military wisdom suggested the defender held overwhelming advantage in such terrain. One could not see more than 50 yards in any direction. Coordinating attacks across multiple companies became nearly impossible without visual contact. The Germans, intimately familiar with the ground, should have been able to defeat American assaults piecemeal, one hedgerow at a time. Instead, the Americans conquered the bocage through a revolution invisible to the enemy. Captain Robert Miller, S3 operations officer of the 2nd Battalion, 29th Infantry Regiment, described the technique. We would attack across a broad front with all 3 companies simultaneously, but each platoon operated semi-independently, using radio to coordinate. If 3rd Platoon of Company A encountered heavy resistance at a particular hedgerow, they would report it over the SCR 536. Company A would shift its weight elsewhere. Meanwhile, Company B, hearing the transmission on their own radio net, would maneuver to flank the German position Company A had fixed. The Germans could not respond at the same speed. They fought us blind and deaf while we saw and heard everything. The after-action reports filed by German commanders in Normandy reveal a consistent pattern of bewilderment. American units appeared to possess almost supernatural coordination. Attacks came from unexpected directions. Artillery fire arrived with impossible speed. Encirclements developed before German officers even realized their flanks were threatened. Oberst Helmut Hürtgen, commanding the Panzerlehr Division, wrote, "The Americans fight not as companies or battalions, but as a single organism. We destroy one company and 2 more arrive at the exact spot where we are weakest. We cannot understand their method." The method was radios. Thousands upon thousands of radios, ubiquitous, unremarkable, revolutionary. The Americans had not simply motorized their army or mechanized their doctrine. They had created the first true network force, where information moved faster than bullets and coordination happened at the speed of thought. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. September 1944. The Siegfried Line. Wehrmacht forces fell back to Germany's pre-war fortifications, the West Wall that Hitler had ordered, built in the 1930s. The concrete bunkers and anti-tank obstacles should have provided formidable defensive advantages. German commanders anticipated weeks, perhaps months, of attritional fighting while they reorganized their shattered armies. The American Third Army reached the West Wall on September 11th. By September 19th, they had penetrated it in multiple sectors. The breakthrough came not from overwhelming force or superior armor. It came from the ability to concentrate force at precise moments, to exploit gaps as they appeared, to shift reserves faster than the defender could react. Captain Werner Pluskat, defending a sector near Trier, described his experience. We would prepare defenses at the point we expected attack. The Americans would probe our position, discover our strength, and within minutes, sometimes seconds, redirect their assault half a kilometer to our left or right, where we were weak. By the time we could move reserves by runner or motorcycle courier, they had already broken through. Our response time was geological. Theirs was instantaneous. The Signal Corps, that unglamorous branch of the American military that Hollywood never celebrated, had delivered a capability more valuable than any wonder weapon. They had given every private soldier a tool that German regimental commanders lacked, the ability to call for help and actually receive it. Not every battle turned on radios. Not every engagement demonstrated American communications superiority. War remains a domain of chance, courage, and chaos, where the best technology guarantees nothing. German soldiers fought with skill and determination that American commanders consistently praised in their reports. Individual German units achieved tactical victories throughout the war, often against superior numbers and firepower. But the cumulative effect, the steady grinding attrition of fighting an enemy who always seemed to know where you were and what you were doing, who could call artillery fire on your position faster than you could call for reinforcements, who coordinated at company level better than you coordinated at division level. This wore down the Wehrmacht more certainly than any single defeat. The German General Staff, that institution that had pioneered modern military doctrine, produced thousands of pages of analysis during and after the war. They examined American tactics, American weapons, American logistics, American training. They noted the Sherman tank's inferiority to German armor. They documented the relative effectiveness of various weapon systems. They calculated production figures and manpower ratios. Yet, the role of communications appears only sporadically in these analyses, usually as a footnote or technical note. The generals who had commanded armies in the field struggled to quantify something so fundamental it became invisible. How do you measure the advantage of knowing versus not knowing? How do you calculate the value of speed when your opponent lacks any reference for what speed should feel like? General der Panzertruppe Hermann Balck, one of Germany's most successful defensive commanders, came closest to understanding in his post-war interrogation. The Americans had a quality we could not match. Not courage, we were equal there. Not tactics, we often outmaneuvered them locally. What they possessed was a kind of collective awareness. Their companies fought as platoons, their battalions as companies. The information density of their formations was 3 or 4 times our own. Against this, courage and tactical skill eventually prove inadequate. Information density. That phrase, so modern in its computer-age connotations, captured a truth about 20th century warfare that would define every conflict to follow. An army with more sensors, faster communication, and better coordination could defeat an army with superior weapons if the information advantage was large enough. The United States Army in World War II proved that theorem, not through a single decisive battle, not through dramatic technological leaps visible on newsreels, through the quiet, relentless accumulation of small advantages multiplied across thousands of engagements on 3 continents over 4 years. A platoon that called for artillery support and received it, a company that coordinated its attack with the company on its flank, a battalion that knew where all its units were without waiting, for situation reports to travel up and down the chain of command. 53 radios versus 17, 50,000 production units versus 5,000, network warfare versus industrial warfare. The Germans never caught up. They tried. In 1944, Albert Speer, Hitler's armaments minister, finally authorized a crash program to increase radio production. The program delivered perhaps 2,000 additional transceivers before Germany's industrial base collapsed under Allied bombing and Soviet advance. Too little, too late. The wrong war. By December 1944, when Hauptmann Schmidt found that captured American signal distribution list in the Hürtgen Forest, the outcome was already determined. Not by that single battalion's radios, by the philosophy those radios represented. The United States had built an army where every private soldier was a node in a network, where information flowed horizontally and vertically with equal ease, where command and control became command and coordination. The Wehrmacht had built an army where radios were luxury items for senior officers, where companies communicated through runners or not at all. Where coordination meant following a predetermined plan, because deviation required communication capabilities that did not exist. One model belonged to the 20th century, the other to the 19th. In 1944, that difference proved decisive. In every subsequent American conflict, from Korea to Vietnam, to Iraq to Afghanistan, the same principle would apply. The network defeats the platform. Information dominates mass. Coordination trumps courage. The Germans knew how to fight. What they lacked was the ability to fight together, and in modern war, that inability proved fatal. The story of America's radio revolution did not begin in 1941 with a contract awarded to Motorola. It began decades earlier in the unglamorous world of industrial planning and doctrinal evolution. While Germany focused on perfecting the weapon, America perfected the system. In 1920, the United States Army Signal Corps established the first formal doctrine for tactical radio communications. The document, Signal Corps Training Regulation No. 15, ran to just 43 pages. Most dealt with Morse code procedures and antenna construction. But buried in Section 8 was a single paragraph that would reshape warfare. Radio communication shall be distributed to the lowest practical level of command to ensure timely coordination of combined arms. Lowest practical level. In 1920, that meant battalion headquarters. The radios of that era weighed hundreds of pounds, required truck-mounted generators, and broke down if you looked at them wrong. Practical meant what technology allowed. But doctrine, once written, creates its own momentum. Engineers read lowest practical level and ask themselves, how low can we go? What would it take to put a radio in every company, every platoon, every squad? The Germans asked different questions. In the 1920s, the Reichswehr operated under crushing restrictions imposed by the Treaty of Versailles. Limited to 100,000 men, 7 signal battalions, and strictly controlled equipment lists, German planners focused on quality over quantity. They would build the finest radios in Europe, individual masterpieces of engineering. The Tornister Funkgerät series that emerged from this philosophy exemplified German design principles. The Tonfew.B, introduced in the early 1930s, operated in the 3 to 5 MHz frequency range with crystal-clear audio quality, 0.7 watts output for both voice and continuous wave transmission, sophisticated circuitry, precision manufacturing. Beautiful in its complexity. It also weighed 37 pounds when fully assembled. Required 2 men to operate. One carrying the transceiver, another hauling the battery pack and power supply. A cable linked the 2 soldiers together. The system needed 10 to 15 minutes to set up, including antenna erection and frequency tuning. Once established, it could not easily move. The Torn.Few.B was never intended for mobile warfare. German doctrine assigned it to regimental and battalion command posts, which were expected to remain relatively static while mobile forces maneuvered forward. This made perfect sense in the context of First World War experience, where command posts stayed in bunkers and communication happened through buried telephone cables. It made no sense whatsoever in the context of Blitzkrieg. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. Heinz Guderian, the architect of German armored doctrine, recognized this contradiction immediately. His 1937 treatise, Achtung Panzer, dedicated 3 full chapters to communications. The tank without radio, he wrote, is a blind steel coffin. The tank force without internal communication is a mob, not an army. Guderian fought for radio production with the fury of a man who saw the future. He won the argument for tanks. Every German panzer received at least one radio, usually the Fuge 5 transceiver operating in the 22 to 33 MHz range. Command tanks received 2 or even 3 radios. The panzer divisions became Germany's most heavily networked formations, but Guderian lost the argument for infantry. The Oberkommando des Heeres, the Army High Command, calculated that equipping every infantry division to panzer division standards would require 40,000 additional transceivers. German industry, they concluded, could not produce such quantities while simultaneously building tanks, artillery, aircraft, and the 1,000 other items modern armies consumed. The decision was defensible, rational even, given industrial constraints, and completely wrong, because in Chicago, Daniel Noble and his team at Galvin Manufacturing were not asking, how do we build better radios? They were asking, how do we build radios better? The distinction mattered enormously. Noble's breakthrough came from accepting limitations rather than fighting them. The SCR 536 would not have the range of a Tonfubi. Its 5 pounds versus 37 pounds meant smaller batteries, lower power output, shorter antenna. Under ideal conditions, the German set could reach 10 kilometers. The American set maxed out around 1 mile, often less. But Noble understood something German engineers missed. 1 mile was enough. A rifle platoon operated within a few hundred yards of its company headquarters. A company stayed within a mile of its battalion command post. The SCR 536 did not need to reach across the battlefield. It only needed to reach the next link in the chain. More importantly, Noble embraced mass production principles that German craftsmen found philosophically repugnant. The SCR 536 used off-the-shelf components wherever possible. Its 5 vacuum tubes were commercial radio tubes manufactured by the millions for civilian sets. The case was molded plastic, not machined metal. The design prioritized manufacturability over performance, reliability over sophistication. A German signals officer examining a captured SCR 536 in Tunisia wrote dismissively, "This device represents crude American industrial philosophy. Build many cheap items rather than few excellent ones. The audio quality is poor, the frequency stability marginal, the construction simplistic. It will perform adequately for unsophisticated users, but lacks the precision necessary for proper military communications." He was correct about everything except what mattered. The SCR 536 was crude, cheap, and simple. These qualities made it perfect. Motorola's production line in Chicago achieved something German industry never approached: standardization at scale. By 1943, the factory produced 1 completed SCR 536 every 11 minutes, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Workers with minimal training assembled them from prefabricated components. Quality control consisted of basic functionality tests, not precision measurements. Each unit cost approximately $58 to manufacture. The nearest German equivalent, the Feldfew.B low-power VHF transceiver introduced in 1944, cost approximately 230 Reichsmarks, roughly $92, and required skilled technicians for final assembly and calibration. But the real cost difference came in deployment. An American rifle company receiving 6 SCR 536s needed no additional personnel. Every platoon already had a designated radio operator, usually the platoon sergeant or a specially trained corporal. The training course lasted 2 days. Pull out antenna, turn on, press, transmit, speak, release, transmit, listen. The simplicity was the point. A German infantry company fortunate enough to receive radios needed to detail specialists to operate them. The Torn.Fu.D2, the closest German equivalent to the SCR 300, required a 2-man team with specialized training in antenna erection, frequency selection, and power management. The training course lasted 3 weeks. These specialists, necessarily drawn from the combat ranks, represented a net loss of riflemen. The mathematics compounded across echelons. An American infantry division with built-in radio capability at platoon level operated at full combat strength while maintaining superior communications. A German infantry division attempting to achieve similar communications density would need to detail hundreds of soldiers away from combat roles into signals duties. Germany never attempted it. The Heer's signal battalions remained separate units assigned to support combat divisions but not integrated into them. When divisions advanced rapidly, their signal units often fell behind, creating communication gaps that runners and motorcycle messengers struggled to fill. Italy demonstrated this weakness with brutal clarity. September 1943. American and British forces landed at Salerno. The German response, coordinated by Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, should have driven the Allies back into the sea. German forces held the high ground. They possessed interior lines of communication. They knew the terrain intimately, but they could not coordinate their counterattacks. The 16th Panzer Division struck from the north. The 26th Panzer Division attacked from the east. Hermann Göring Panzer Division pressed from the northeast. Each attack, taken individually, came close to success. Taken together, they arrived at different times, allowing the Allies to shift reserves and defeat each thrust sequentially. Allied signals intelligence intercepted desperate German radio traffic. Where is 16th Panzer? Have you established contact with division? Attacking now, no support visible on flanks. The transmissions revealed commanders fighting blind, uncertain of friendly positions, unable to synchronize their efforts. Meanwhile, American forces communicated continuously. Forward observers called artillery fire from naval vessels offshore. Infantry companies reported German positions to battalion headquarters, which passed targeting data to air support controllers, who vectored fighter bombers onto targets within minutes. The speed of information flow compensated for American numerical inferiority. Lieutenant Colonel Rudolf Böhmler, operations officer of the 26th Panzer Division, wrote in his diary, "We attack into a fog. The Americans see us coming and adjust faster than we can advance. Their coordination is not better trained than ours. It is better informed." Better informed. The phrase captured everything. An American company, commander with an SCR 300 radio, was better informed than a German regimental commander dependent on motorcycle couriers. An American forward observer with direct radio links to artillery batteries wielded more firepower than a German battalion commander who had to route requests through division headquarters. The Pacific Theater amplified these advantages to almost comical extremes. Jungle terrain that blocked visual communication and severed wire lines had minimal effect on radio transmissions. The thick vegetation that made traditional command and control nearly impossible created ideal conditions for FM radio, which penetrated foliage better than AM. Guadalcanal, August 1942. The 1st Marine Division landed with 143 radio sets, not counting platoon-level units. Company commanders communicated directly with battalion. Battalion spoke to regiment. Regiment maintained continuous contact with division headquarters on the beach, which itself communicated with naval vessels offshore and aircraft overhead. Japanese forces, by contrast, operated with radios only at regimental level and above. Battalion commanders relied on telephone wire, which American artillery cut systematically. Company and platoon leaders used runners, signal flags, or simply shouted orders. In the dense jungle, this reduced effective command and control to approximately 50 yards. The result was predictable. Japanese units fought with ferocious courage and tactical skill, but in isolation. unable to support each other or respond to American maneuvers. Marine companies would fix a Japanese position with frontal pressure while another company flanked it, coordinating the movement by radio. Japanese commanders, lacking any means to warn their flanked units or request support, watched their positions fall one after another. Colonel Kiyonawi Chiki, commanding the Japanese assault on August 20th, 1942, led 800 men in a nighttime attack on Marine positions. His plan was sophisticated: a frontal assault to fix American attention while his main force infiltrated through the jungle to strike from the flank. It should have worked, but Marine radio operators tracked Japanese movements through the jungle by coordinating reports from multiple listening posts. When Ichiki's main force emerged from the jungle, they ran directly into prepared positions. Artillery fire, called in by forward observers with radios, caught Japanese troops in the open. Of 800 men, fewer than 30 survived. The pattern repeated across every island, every landing, every battle. Americans communicated, Japanese improvised. The courage and determination of Japanese soldiers, legendary and deserving of respect, could not overcome the fundamental disadvantage of fighting blind while your enemy saw everything. Technical specifications tell only part of the story. The SCR-300 operated on 41 preset frequencies in the 40 to 48 MHz range. The Torn.4FUD-2 operated on 100 frequencies in the 33.8 to 38 MHz range. By pure numbers, the German system offered more flexibility, but frequency selection required tools, time, and training. Changing the frequency on a Torn.FUD-2 involved replacing crystal oscillators and retuning the receiver, a process requiring 5 to 10 minutes under field conditions. The SCR-300 used a simple dial. Turn it, wait 10 seconds for the frequency to stabilize, begin transmitting. An American radio man could switch frequencies faster than a German radio man could confirm his current setting. This seemingly minor difference cascaded through tactical operations. American units under enemy artillery fire could change frequencies to avoid suspected German monitoring, then resume operations almost immediately. German units attempting the same maneuver effectively went silent for 10 minutes or more, precisely when they most needed coordination. Battery life demonstrated similar American advantages through simplicity rather than sophistication. The Torn.FUD-2 used rechargeable batteries with excellent capacity, providing 8 to 12 hours of operation. This seemed superior to the SCR-300's disposable batteries, which lasted approximately 40 hours but could not be recharged. In practice, rechargeable batteries created supply nightmares. Forward units needed charging equipment, which required generators, which required fuel. When fuel became scarce, as it always did in mobile warfare, rechargeable batteries became deadweight. American disposable batteries, by contrast, could be stockpiled, transported easily, and replaced in seconds. When one died, you inserted a fresh one and continued operating. Sergeant James O'Connor, a radio man with the 4th Infantry Division in France, recalled, "We never worried about batteries. Every supply drop included dozens of them. We changed batteries like we changed magazines on our rifles. The Germans we captured always complained their radios stopped working because they couldn't charge the batteries. Our batteries were always fresh." The logistical tale required to support communications revealed the depths of American commitment. By 1944, the Signal Corps operated as one of the largest branches of the United States Army, with over 350,000 personnel. More men served in signals than in the entire Marine Corps. This reflected not bureaucratic bloat, but strategic priority. Every port that handled American cargo included dedicated signals, supply depots. Every major supply dump allocated warehouse space specifically for radio equipment and batteries. Technical manuals for the SCR series filled entire libraries. Training facilities across the United States graduated thousands of radio operators monthly, far more than necessary to replace combat losses. This redundancy was intentional. The Army Signal Corps operated on the assumption that radios would be damaged lost or destroyed at rates far exceeding other equipment. Rather than attempt careful husbandry, they simply flooded the system with more radios than anyone could possibly need. If a company lost 3 of its 6 SCR-536s in combat, a replacement shipment arrived within days, sometimes hours. German signals units operated on opposite principles. Each radio was accounted for meticulously. Losing a transceiver triggered investigations. Damaged equipment was repaired when possible, cannibalized when repair proved impossible. By 1944, German signals workshops spent more time cannibalizing broken radios for parts than repairing functional ones. Oberleutnant Hans Schreiber, signals officer of the 352nd Infantry Division, described the situation. In June 1944, my division was authorized 37 radio transceivers of various types. We actually possessed 19 functioning sets. I could not requisition replacements, because officially we still owned 37 radios. The fact that 18 were destroyed or irreparably damaged mattered little to headquarters. On paper, we were fully equipped. On paper. The gap between German administrative reality and battlefield necessity grew wider every month. American units reported equipment shortages to their supply officers, who ordered replacements that usually arrived quickly. German units reported shortages that disappeared into bureaucratic mazes, emerging months later as notifications that replacement equipment would arrive when production permits. Production never permitted. Germany's industrial base, stretched between too many competing priorities and steadily degraded by Allied bombing, could not simultaneously build U-boats, Tiger tanks, jet aircraft, V-weapons, and radios. Something had to give. Radios gave first because their absence did not create dramatic visible gaps. A division without tanks obviously lacked combat power. A division without radios just seemed difficult to coordinate. The Battle of the Bulge demonstrated what difficult to coordinate meant in practice. December 16th, 1944. German forces launched their last major offensive in the west, striking through the Ardennes forest with 3 armies, totaling over 400,000 men. The planning was meticulous. The security was excellent. Initial surprise was complete. And within 48 hours, German commanders lost control of their own offensive. The problem was not courage or determination. German soldiers fought with the desperation of men who knew this was their last chance. The problem was that 3 armies, attacking on a 60-mile front with dozens of divisions and hundreds of battalions, required coordination at a scale German communication systems could not support. American defenders, initially scattered and disorganized, coalesced through radio. Communication, faster than Germans, could exploit their breakthroughs. Isolated American units called for help and received it. Artillery batteries displaced backwards while maintaining radio contact, continuing to fire even while retreating. Tank destroyer battalions received reports of German armor penetrations and moved to intercept, coordinating their movements through continuous radio nets. German spearheads, by contrast, lost contact with their higher headquarters within hours of the offensive beginning. Fast-moving panzer units outran their communications, creating holes in the command structure that motorcycle couriers struggled to fill. When American resistance stiffened unexpectedly, German commanders often could not call for support because they had no means to reach it. Oberst Otto Skorzeny, commanding a special operations group during the offensive, wrote afterwards, "Our greatest enemy was not American resistance. It was our own lack of information. I did not know where our own forces were, where Americans were strongest, where gaps existed to exploit. I fought almost blind, while Americans saw everything." The Allies saw everything because they talked about everything. Continuously, obsessively. American radio discipline was notoriously poor, with soldiers chattering about trivial matters, complaining about conditions, joking with each other. German signals intelligence officers, accustomed to strictly disciplined radio procedure, were horrified. But the chatter served a purpose beyond morale. It meant the nets were always active, always functioning, always tested. When crisis came and silence gave way to frantic calls for support, the radios worked because they had never stopped working. German units, trained to maintain radio silence, except when absolutely necessary, often discovered their equipment had failed only when they needed it most. Technical reliability favored American designs for precisely this reason. The SCR 536's simple circuitry broke less often than the torn a few series' sophisticated electronics. When it did break, the problem was usually obvious: a broken tube, a dead battery, a damaged antenna. Field repairs rarely required more than swapping out a component. German radios, when they failed, often failed mysteriously. The complex circuitry meant dozens of potential failure points. Diagnosis required test equipment and expertise. Many German signal specialists spent the war troubleshooting equipment that American soldiers would simply have discarded and replaced. This philosophy extended to every level of the communications hierarchy. American signal battalions focused on maintaining networks, not repairing equipment. Broken radios went to rear area depots for overhaul or disposal. Replacement equipment came forward continuously. The network stayed functional because no one tried to preserve individual components. German signal battalions performed miracles of improvisation, keeping obsolete equipment functional through skill and determination. But miracles cannot be sustained indefinitely. By 1945, German communications had degraded to First World War standards. Many infantry regiments possessed fewer working radios than they had owned in 1939. The final irony came in May 1945, when Germany surrendered. American signals intelligence officers examined captured German signals equipment with genuine interest. Some pieces impressed them. The Tornfudi II, in particular, drew praise for its elegant engineering and excellent audio quality. But when they examined German communications doctrine and deployment figures, the Americans reacted with confusion. Why so few radios? Why concentrate them at high echelon? Why train specialists when every soldier could learn basic radio operation in 2 days? The answer, which German officers struggled to articulate, came down to fundamental philosophical differences. Germany had treated communications as a specialized technical function requiring expert operators and sophisticated equipment. America had treated communications as a basic military necessity, like rifles and boots, requiring simple equipment everyone could use. One approach produced radios as precision instruments. The other produced radios as commodity tools. In the industrial warfare of the mid-20th century, the commodity approach won decisively. The lessons echoed through subsequent American conflicts. Korea saw the introduction of the AN/PRC-6, a miniaturized version of the SCR 536. Vietnam brought squad-level radios as standard equipment. By the 1990s, digital communications allowed every soldier to potentially access information previously restricted to generals. The trajectory was clear. Push information to the lowest level, distribute communications as widely as possible, except that imperfect communication beats perfect silence. Modern American infantry platoons operate with communications capabilities that would astonish a World War II division commander. GPS, satellite links, data networks, but the philosophy remains identical to Daniel Noble's insight in 1941. Build it simple, build it cheap, build enough for everyone, and trust the system to succeed through ubiquity rather than sophistication. The Germans, had they known what we know now, might have made different choices. But in the late 1930s, when those choices mattered, they could not imagine an army where every private soldier carried a radio. The idea seemed wasteful, unnecessary, contrary to proper military order. It was none of those things. It was the future. And the future, in this case, spoke with an American accent over an SCR 536 at 1 mile range, crude, simple, revolutionary, and unstoppable. I thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, Check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.